Welcome back to this week's episode of Romantasy versus Reality. I am Grace.
And I'm Aaron.
And this week we're going to go over chapters 23 to 28. What are you drinking today?
No cocktails today. I am drinking an IPA from a brewery out of Raleigh, North Carolina called Fun Guys. Well, it's the name of the brewery, not the name of the beer.
Oh, Fun Guys.
Fun Guys.
I am drinking a fest beer from Spindletop back in Houston, back where I'm headed for a couple of days. To summarize chapters 23 to 28, nothing happened. Just kidding. Very little happened, but it was kind of the pivot point for the whole story. So we're going to give a brief summary and then discuss it a little bit more in depth. Chapter 23, Tamlin gives Feyre fairy sight, and we see how shallow she is because the first thing she does is she kind of tries to pry his mask off, and she wants to see his face. She's kind of showing a little bit of her true colors there. Chapter 24, Feyre wakes up in the castle and sees all of the fairies that she hasn't been seeing for forever, and she sees Alice for the first time as she truly is, and she's like, where's Alice? Is everything okay? Is Alice okay? And Alice just looks at her like, the fuck is wrong with you? I am Alice. Hello? And, Feyre realizes, oh, she was a stupid, cowering human. So Tamlin had to glamour them so that she wasn't terrified while she adjusted. Feyre realizes when she sees all of the other fairies on the estate that she had an audience when she ran after the puka, which is kind of hilarious.
And sad.
They
just let her go.
They just let her go. They all were just kind of like pointing and laughing. And then she goes out into the garden and finds a head impaled there. Hello, trauma. Emotional damage. Anyway, we learn Tamlin and Lucian's feelings about the Night Court, which are not very positive.
Well, they did leave a head there, so...
That's true. It's
kind of hard to look at that in a good way.
I mean, they even said that it's their High Lord's idea of a joke. So, anyway, Feyre tells Tamlin that he's not like his brothers or his father and denies her Stockholm Syndrome in favor of lust. Chapter 25, we go to the summer solstice where Feyre is told not to drink the fairy wine.
Warning number like 5 or 6.
At least. So, of course...
immediately downs the whole thing.
Yeah. Multiple glasses of fairy wine. Tamlin takes her to see the Will-o'-the-Wisps, which is kind of a parallel to another event in ACOMAF. And then they dance and they kiss and they watch the sunrise, and it's the happiest moment of Feyre's life.
That low bar.
Very low bar. Such a low bar. It is a cute date, though. I will give him that. Chapter 26... The Blight took out 24 Winter Court younglings. Enter Rhysand. The bulk of our action happens in chapter 26. And when I say that, I mean the bulk of our information for this chunk of chapters is in this chapter. Rhysand warns Tamlin about the Blight treating Feyre like a plaything when they finally wind up under the mountain. And we finally get a fucking name. Amarantha. We finally get the name. So Rhys is basically taunting Tamlin about what Amarantha will do when she sees Feyre, when Feyre goes with Tamlin under the mountain with the rest of his court. And we learn a whole lot all of a sudden about kind of what's going on in the background. We learn that Rhysand is the High Lord of the Night Court. We learn that he's known as Amarantha's whore. We learn Amarantha's name. We learn about Under the Mountain, which is where the rest of Prythian seems to have been gathered up. And then Tamlin gets scared, cowers before Rhysand and begs him not to tell Amarantha that Feyre is there. And Feyre gives Rhys a false name, Claire Better. And
totally buddy fucks her.
Yeah, that's going to come back to bite Feyre, for sure.
Not as much as it does Claire Better.
I know. Did I mention emotional damage? More like physical in Claire Better's poor case. Yeah. And, we see Tamlin is absolutely terrified at the end of this chapter. In chapter 27, therefore, Tamlin sends Feyre away, but not before he fucks her. And he says, I love you to her as she's kind of falling asleep. In a nice little nod to the title, I love you, thorns and all. Chapter 28, in which Feyre still does not say I love you to Tamlin, despite him saying it twice, even when he says it to her out loud before she leaves to go back to her family's estate in the human lands. Yeah. She still just is like, I just can't bring myself to say those words. And then she sees how her family has been living and is absolutely blown away. And that's where we leave off. So tell me your thoughts. What did you think about this set of chapters?
They were kind of all divergent, but not important. Like, it wasn't a continuous overarching theme of these chapters. They really felt like
it's just scenes
that are loosely tied together chronologically. So she loses the glamour. She can now see everything, which she gets over pretty quickly once she realizes that she's very forgiving of Tamlin for the glamoring thing and the mind altering thing. And
she's very forgiving for a lot of the shit Tamlin does.
Yeah. We finally get Rhysand's name, so she officially meets him.
Yes.
We get the summer solstice, and so we get to see Tamlin with his hair down.
Play that fiddle pretty good, boy. Not quite a devil went down to Georgia, though.
We've seen her move from fairy hatred to fairy tolerance to fairy lust, and now she finally gets a deep dickin'.
She does.
And
a few times. Doesn't mistake me.
She's just not ready to commit, though.
I guess not.
Must not have been that mind-blowing. And then...
Well, probably wasn't. Tamlin's game is pretty rusty, so I'm imagining his sexual prowess is...
Still a few hundred years of experience.
Should be.
Then he pulls the classic pump and dump and sends her on her way back to her family.
At least he gave her some cab fare.
He did. It's true.
A lot of cab fare. She's probably the best paid whore in all of Prythian.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider Rhysand as Amaranthus whore. I guess that makes Feyre Tamlin's.
Kinda. He caught feelings and had to get rid of her.
Oh my god, he Richard Geared her. He shouldn't have kissed her on the mouth.
Never.
Should never kiss them.
Is that your rule, or?
No, Pretty Woman.
I know, but I'm just saying, is that your rule, though?
I kissed you. I kissed you on the first date, I believe.
Are you calling me a whore?
No, I think it's the opposite, because I did kiss you. You don't kiss the whores. You're not supposed to. You don't kiss.
You said that was your rule.
No, I said that's the rule. It's Pretty Woman. It's Richard Gere's rule. I'm not Richard Gere. Do I look like Richard Gere to you? Please say no if you're watching the video. Even if you're listening to this, I sound nothing like him. Just please say no. It'll make my self-confidence go up.
All right, moving on.
Part 3, tropes. There aren't really a lot to pick and choose from in this hodgepodge of chapters.
It's just a repeat of themes, right? The themes of Feyre asking for more information or asking to help and her being pushed away. It's not really trope. It's just a repeat of the same theme, right? Which, if that changed or if the miscommunication changed, would advance the story much faster,
right?
Than I guess we're prepared for. So we're going to lengthen it by not telling her.
Yes.
As I wrongly stated last week, he does the next point of the Beauty and the Beast arc by sending her back to her family.
Yes, he sends her back to her family. And honestly, I know it's not a trope. It's not necessarily miscommunication, but it's a spin off of it, right? It's missing communication. He can't tell her what's going on, but the trope of that is that she doesn't have the whole story, so she's making the wrong choice because of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a title for that trope, but it is used throughout other things. Like, she's missing a huge chunk of the information, although we do get a big chunk of it finally with, Rhys coming to Tamlin's Manor. But because she still doesn't know that they're cursed. She doesn't know the extent of which they are cursed, the rules and parameters of how to break it, none of that. So, of course, she has no idea that just simply admitting her feelings would help. I know that Tamlin said I love you. But is there anywhere in those? We'll talk about it too when we get to Under the Mountain. I do not recall anywhere in any of those rules or parameters that Amarantha set up where it said that he could not ask her how she felt about him. And I know that this is a really lame parallel, but go with me here. Original Charmed,
Uh-huh.
Little Mermaid special. So it was a 2-part special where Phoebe gets all upset and she goes to help this mermaid find love. It's Amy Presley. And she comes on land and her name is Miley. And she says, "It's just really important that you tell me how you feel about me." And the guy just won't do it. And of course, that means that the mermaid gets stuck going back to the sea, and the sea witch is supposed to get her magic, right? At least in that one, she tried. All he had to do was tell her he loved her, and then she would have been free. She at least asked him, "Hey, how do you feel about me? It's really important that you tell me how you feel about me." Tamlin didn't even ask her. He just said, "I love you," and like hoped and prayed. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Say it back.
Now, I don't even know if it was that. He could have given her like at least 6 more hours, right?
He had days.
Sit down
He
and
didn't,
talk to
it's not
her.
like he took her himself. He could have sent her on a carriage. He could have given her a full other day.
He could have gone with her.
He could have. Maybe if he banged her out one more time, she might have said the words. Just saying.
It's just once again, you gotta get the story a little bit longer.
Yeah.
If it just ended there, that would be
be a pretty lackluster curse.
finale. Yeah.
Yeah. Still though, I just feel like if he had just said, "Feyre, I love you. I don't think I can see you go. I don't think I can watch you go. Stay." I 100% bet she probably would have said, "I love you too. I want to stay." And then our story would have ended and we would have had none of the last 100 pages that Sarah J. Maas is known for.
Or he could have just got her to say it by like playing a game of charades.
I don't think that counts.
We don't know that it doesn't count.
We don't know that, but pretty sure that it does not.
Well, if she would have meant it, he just got her to say it.
I don't think it works that way.
Eh,
Still, though,
I've heard it
points
both
for
ways.
not
Said the liar.
points for creativity. We're going to move on to character development, though. We'll start off with Lucian because he gets 2 scenes in the whole thing.
Yeah, basically, just he knows what sending her away means, and he's just like tired of Tamlin's pussyfooting around.
Yeah, he's fed up with his bullshit.
Well, it affects him too. It affects his entire court, and so he's his friend, but at the same time, he's like, dude, put up or shut up.
Right? It's not just Tamlin he's fed up with. He's fucking fed up with Feyre. He's like, "Do not drink the fairy wine." And she's like, "Ha ha ha ha." And she gets all schwasty-faced and starts tripping over shit and like wobbling around and dancing off. And he goes, "I am not going to follow you around the rest of the night and keep you from killing yourself because you're tripping and you're going to impale yourself on a rock."
But then Tamlin takes over. Well, they don't do anything then.
No, they don't. But like, is it really truly a date? Is it really truly her admitting to having feelings if the first time you kiss her, she's drunk and high off fairy one? Well, that would not fly in today's society.
By then, we're talking hours later.
So. She was still very much buzzed. She mentions it a couple times.
A little buzzed. Not as buzzed as she was before.
No, I don't know. It parallels a scene or two from Under the Mountain. And I think that it's really hypocritical that everyone is very upset with what happens Under the Mountain with Feyre, but everybody is willing to give Tamlin a pass for doing something kind of similar. He knows that she's like drunk on fairy wine and he's just like, "I don't really care. I'm gonna go for it. Now's the time. It's a great time."
Yeah. Although, if I was Lucian, back to Lucian.
Yes.
And I realized that Feyre wasn't going to listen to anything I said, I would probably use that to just screw with her.
Yeah. I would have told her, "Drink the wine. I would love to see what you look like intoxicated."
Be like, that wall is totally not fake. And you shouldn't try to run headfirst into it. Whatever you do, don't run headfirst into that wall.
We talked about this last week. You're not allowed to make the jokes while I'm actively drinking a beverage. I almost just spewed beer all over the keyboard. Sir. Okay. Yeah, he might have screwed with her. I also think he's fed up with her, but at the same time, he teases her. At the beginning of the chapter right after the solstice, when she comes in, it's before the solstice. She goes in and she sees him, and Feyre says to Lucian, "Well, I haven't seen you in a while. Been busy?" And he goes, "Yeah, someone's got to be on all that border patrol. You two are off gallivanting around. If I offer you the moon on a string, will you give me a kiss too?" And it's like right after
Yeah.
her glamour is removed, and he's back to teasing her. And I don't know, I like their banter, I like their relationship. I think he should have been the love interest. He's way better at it, but
Yeah, I
it's
thought he
fun.
was for a hot minute when I first
Yeah,
read through.
I did too. But I like their banter. I like that, she brought it back, even if things are about to get really heavy. At
Yeah.
least we had a couple more moments of levity before we head into the last 100 pages of desolation that is known as the ending of a Sarah J. Maas book. So I'll take it. And we talked about, Tamlin and, how he kind of took advantage of Feyre during the solstice. But he also, when he's fiddling, she remembers that he wanted to be a traveling
Minstrel,
minstrel.
yeah.
And my personal theory is, just like Feyre, who is not good at painting at all in any way, Tamlin's probably an absolute terrible fiddle player, but no one wants to admit it.
Well, when I read, the other thing is when I read this, and it describes her like dancing, but in my head, she's like every drunk girl at a bar dancing. She's out there just sloppy drunk, like stumbling around and trying to do like the craziest dance moves. And in her mind, much like her painting, she's amazing.
Yes.
But to everyone else, like she is
They
just,
give her a wide berth.
yeah.
It's like that girl who came to our wedding who was like standing against the wall trying to twerk.
Yeah.
She thought she looked amazing, but
Yeah. She's just over there, white girl wasted,
yeah.
like spilling fairy wine everywhere.
I
And
think we have that on video. Oh, yeah. No, I think that Feyre is probably just as terrible at dancing as she is at painting. Even if later we find out she's not terrible at painting. No, I'm imagining the same thing in my head. I'm glad we're on the same page. Tamlin is, when he's playing the fiddle, he gives off more of a carefree air, and he's very playful and fun and not as weighed down
right.
by what's going on. And it's nice to see that side of him, even if we don't get it very much or very much going forward. And he takes her on his little date and he shows her the will-o'-the-wisps, and he dances with her until the sun rises and they kiss for the first time, and he's very happy and smiling, and it's just not a part of Tamlin we ever really see, and it's not one we really ever see again.
True. It's true.
Again at all, ever. So there's that. And then there's, the whole thing with Rhysand.
Yeah. Yeah.
You seem very upset that he basically prostrated himself.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later.
Okay. And then, of course, he tells Feyre that he loves her. I kind of feel like that's a big deal for him.
Yes.
I'm not really sure if he ever planned on loving the human he brought back, or if he was just trying to convince her to love him. I think it kind of took him by surprise.
Because everyone loves Feyre.
Everyone does love Feyre.
You just meet her, this drunk girl who thinks she can paint, and then everyone just falls magically in love with her.
I mean, if the shoe fits, I guess.
Female power fantasy. Gotta love it.
She's, I don't know. I'm not like an enormous fan of Feyre's character. She's not my favorite in the series, but the books are from her perspective, so we get a lot more of her. Maybe if the only thing we saw was her through other people's perspectives, we might also feel the same way. We get a lot of just Alice from Feyre's perspective, and we absolutely love her sass and snark and her wisdom and how she passes it on. But maybe if we were hearing Alice's inner thoughts, we wouldn't like her quite as much.
Oh, I don't think you'd want to hear Alice's inner thoughts about Feyre.
I can agree with that.
It's like, if I have to look at this dumb bitch one more time.
That is true. And to be fair, she doesn't really change much in these chapters at all. And she's also For someone who's brave enough to go hunting in the woods and ride into Prithian and not let it show that she's upset, and she's, she always tries to put up a really brave front. She's really not brave enough to admit that she loves Tamlin. And she flat out says that she feels it, but just can't bring herself to say the words out loud. What the fuck is that?
I don't know.
What exactly does she say? It is so pathetic. What she says is so pathetic in her head. Tamlin smiled at me one last time. I love you, he said, and stepped away. I should say it. I should say those words, but they got stuck in my throat because of what he had to face, because he might not find me again despite his promise, because beneath it all, he was an immortal, and I would grow old and die, and maybe he meant it now, and perhaps last night had been as altering for him as it had been for me, but I would not become a burden to him. I would not become another weight pressing upon his shoulders. So I said nothing as the carriage moved, and I did not look back as we passed through the manor gates and into the forest beyond. And I'm sorry, but every single one of the reasons that she just gave is a reason to say the words. He might never find you again. He might never know, going into whatever he has to bear, how you really felt about him. Those are all reasons to have fucking told him, I love you, to give him that. Even if you don't last forever and he is immortal, those are reasons where you would want to share those feelings.
Well,
so
I mean, it's not
person...
the real reasons. She's been like, because there's 150 pages left in this book.
That would be very meta. Very fourth wall.
Yeah.
The whole thing bothered me. She is so brave. It's not fitting with her character to make excuses for not doing something. She always just kind of like squared up her shoulders and got the work done. So for her to just shrink into herself and make excuses doesn't make sense to me.
Well, she's physically strong, but emotionally vulnerable. I don't know.
No, she's emotionally tough as nails. I mean, she takes care of her family despite being the youngest one. She's surviving in Prithian, holding her own, and then what? She can't say 3 little words? I just don't buy it.
Maybe she's not. Maybe it was really bad sex.
That is possible.
She's like, I really care for this guy, but man, that was terrible.
I mean, she doesn't necessarily say anything about how, like, she compares his smile to Isaac and how that makes her feel, but not the sex.
She got right on that carriage. He didn't have to push her at all.
No, you can say that it was because of, not wanting to be a burden to Tamlin all you want, but that sounds like a more accurate. I'll buy that. Sex was just that bad, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. She really doesn't change much, though.
No.
It's kind of, I mean, it's hard to change, right? She was already in love with him. I think these chapters were just an illustration of their admission of love, even if they don't say the words to each other, or even if Feyre doesn't say the words.
Whatever the reason is, she left.
So, part 5, plot and world building. We finally get a fucking name. I've been so sick of calling her the Blight. It's almost a relief to say her name. Amarantha. 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 Oh, I guess it's not like Beetlejuice.
No.
It's probably for the best. She was kind of fucked up.
She doesn't put together that the Blight and Amarantha are the same thing.
She doesn't, no. Which is, I mean...
kind of understandable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, she doesn't seem to be connecting the dots that they're connected.
No.
Really?
No, and I think it's much easier for us as the reader to put it together, because in one breath, Lucien is telling Tamlin that the Blight took out 20 younglings.
Right.
But, like, the Blight has been only hurting magic thus far. It hasn't really been killing anything. And then in the next breath, we hear about Amarantha and how she has gathered everyone under the mountain. And it's a little easier for us to maybe put those two pieces together because of their proximity to each other. But I guess maybe for Feyre, it's not, because she has a very limited knowledge of what's going on.
I know they can't talk to her because of the curse, right?
Yes.
But if she were to ask a directed question, could they answer it truthfully, or would they have to lie?
I think they have to lie. Like, they were forbidden from saying anything to her about the curse. And I think...
So, like, if she were to say, is Blight
Amarantha the Blight?
Amarantha. if she were to say that to them, would they have to say no? Or could they say yes?
I think maybe technically they could say yes because they're not saying anything to her, but that would require Feyre to have been smart enough to ask questions more than just, oh, is this a disease killing things? Like, she's really not thinking outside the box here.
I mean, she's distracted, but.
Yeah, that Deep Dickin will do that.
And the fairy wine.
The fairy wine, yeah. And all the fairies that magically appeared overnight.
But it'd been nice if she asked.
It would have been, yes. It would have been very nice if she had just asked any kind of leading question that had prompted more of a conversation. And honestly, most of our world building in these chapters didn't come from her, it came from Rhysand.
Yes.
The head in the garden prompted us hearing about Tamlin and Lucian's thoughts. Tamlin and Lucian have some pretty strong thoughts on the Night Court. Tamlin says, the Night Court does what it wants. They live by their own codes, their own corrupt morals. That's pretty telling. It's a pretty, pretty clear fucking picture of what he thinks of the Night Court.
Edgelords, the whole lot of them.
Yeah, and then Lucian follows it up with, they're all sadistic killers. They delight in the torture of every kind and would find this sort of stunt to be amusing. He's talking about the head on the pike in the garden. So
they're like politicians.
Yeah, I guess so. Those are really, really strong words about a court we have literally never heard about until now. It's, I think, been mentioned once in passing.
Yeah, but we really don't get much of anything about the other courts.
No, we don't. So it's kind of telling and jarring to get such a very hostile negative opinion.
That's another thing. You think she would ask questions about like the world around her?
Yeah, she doesn't do that.
Like, what are the other courts like? Because I wouldn't think that the curse would stop them from filling her in on the rest of the...
No, it would not. The curse was very specific to not being able to mention Amarantha or Tamlin Stoneheart or what she had to do to fulfill the curse, It had nothing to do with it. Because, and we find out a little bit later, spoilers here, spoilers, they're intentionally letting her eavesdrop on them. They're talking in circles even while she's eavesdropping because they know she's eavesdropping and they're trying to get the message across. But they're so tied with what they can say that even when she's not in the room, they can't speak it. So, the magic has to be strong. Just, she never really gives them anything to work with in terms of information about the world around her that might have led to more questions.
Yeah. She basically just asked a question, they thwart her, and then that's it.
Yeah. They thwart her and she gives up. It's kind of sad when you think about it. It's almost like she enjoys being kind of trapped in a gilded cage.
Ooh, that's deep.
It makes sense for her character at this point. She came from absolutely nothing, and now she has safety and security, and she's falling in love,
but she leaves that behind.
The cage looks pretty good right now.
Because we know what she's going back to, and we find out soon after, but she doesn't know that she's going back there.
Right. But that's not what I meant. I meant before he sends her home, when she's not asking these questions, I think she's afraid that illusion would shatter. Maybe subconsciously. Definitely not consciously, because we would know. We would get her thoughts on it, but we don't. It just seems like she would rather live in ignorance.
Right.
I could be wrong. Maybe it's too deep of an analysis. I'm overthinking Feyre's lack of questioning, but
we're also assuming she didn't try off screen, for lack of a better word, and got similar Stonewall.
Yeah, I suppose so. And they're,
But that could have been waved away with a sentence or two.
Yes.
That it says, that I tried over the next few days to learn more and was met with no answers.
Or, met with more riddles or whatever. Yeah. And we get a fair amount from Rhysand insofar as we find out that, he's Amarantha's whore, and he has a very subtle reaction to that, but he still reacts to it. So we know that he doesn't necessarily like it. We know that Amarantha is quite violent
Yes.
based on the things he's telling us. We know that she enjoys being violent.
She's a sadist, yes.
Yes. And Feyre wonders if she's like the head lady of the night court or whatever, because Rhysand is with her. You know, she makes another completely inaccurate assumption, as Feyre tends to do. And we learn that a lot of Prythian is under the mountain, whatever that is. I mean, we know what that is because we've read it, but it's another clue for Feyre.
Yeah. Oh, and the solstice.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to talk about. One more fairy holiday. Although this one, interestingly enough, they do say is a summer court holiday, but
Mm-hmm.
the summer court can hold it
Yes.
for a strange reason.
Yes.
I wonder why.
Could it be because they're all under the mountain?
Or the blight.
Or the blight?
Or Amarantha. Completely unrelated.
Completely unrelated.
They hold the solstice.
Yes.
Which
But
I guess not
recall...
everyone is trapped under the mountain because they had the other festival.
Yeah, and some people came to that. But if you remember, Rhysand had actually said, because I read it as one of the quotes to kind of keep an eye out for,
that they let us out.
All the monsters are roaming free tonight. But the solstice, we don't really get an idea of who came to the solstice. We don't hear whether or not the fairies at the solstice were wearing masks. Some of them were, like some of the band people were, but we don't hear about anybody not wearing masks at the solstice.
Sure.
It is a good fairy holiday tradition. It's a nice touch, another layer to the world building.
So my question is, right, so to go back to Calamai, Feyre was still glamored, so she couldn't see a bunch of the fairies.
Right.
So I wonder how many fairies were actually at that festival that she just couldn't see. One assumes that she either perceives... No, she would see all the other ones, remember, because his fairy only works on members of his, or his
yes,
glamour only works on members of his court, so any other fairy from a different court she would have seen.
Right, which is how she could see the fairy with the wings torn off that had come in that night. But weirdly, she couldn't see the adder, who's not a part of the spring court.
But she did in some way because she painted him.
Yeah, she did paint him, but she says she couldn't see him. She even asks Tamlin, now that she's unglamored, will I be able to see him now? I think maybe I could look it up, but it would take a while. I think she couldn't see him. She might have had an idea of what she was missing, but I think Tamlin specifically glamored her in that instant so that she wasn't visible, and that also made it so she couldn't see the adder. And there has to be an explanation, because otherwise he's already said that he can't glamour fairies outside his court.
Or maybe the adder glamours himself. Oh, he wouldn't do that. That would be pointless.
Yeah, he doesn't know Feyre's there to glamour himself from her.
We wouldn't glamour it from her, maybe just...
in general. Yeah. Well, either way.
Just a little plot hole, I guess. And she wasn't freaked out when she saw the fairies at the festival. Mm-hmm. Then why would she be freaked out? You think he would have just dropped her glamour after that?
You would think, but...
not that important.
No. Tamlin is a book boyfriend. Where are we at now that we've gotten this far? Now that they've banged it out?
Well, I really like that you get to see him, what he would be like if he didn't have all the weight of his station.
Yes.
And that was a nice aside or a glimpse of the kind of person he is. But the one thing I don't like is how he just groveled. Like, he didn't even fight it. He didn't try to tear Rhysand's throat out, even if it was futile. He's just kind of like...
he prostrated himself, man. He went down to the ground so fast. It wasn't even a question.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to have respect for a book character that would do that, right? That he kind of lost some points. And I think it's in certain characters it's one thing, but with this character that you're building up as like this stoic warrior, and Rhysand even talks about how like he was, like how violent he was when he was part of the war parties, and so it's not like he was a coward. He's known to be violent and aggressive, and then he just pusses out.
Yeah, he just throws himself at his feet, at his mercy, which either tells us a lot about Tamlin's character or a lot about Rhysand. Either Tamlin is truly a coward and he only has courage when he knows he can win, or this is a way for Sarah J. Maas to indicate to us just how powerful Rhysand actually is.
I didn't understand, but dude just came into your home,
Yeah.
threatened your girl
Yeah.
who you supposedly love, and you just kind of like took it.
For me, I think that was actually the final nail in the coffin. And that was before we even see his behavior under the mountain, which made me absolutely hate him as a character.
I guess too is he knows that he can't even trust Rhysand, right? Because he immediately sends Farah home,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
he begs and begs for him not to tell, and then immediately knows he's probably going to anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
what was that for? I guess maybe to stop him from just killing her with his mind bullets.
I guess so. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, he does ask, rather than ripping the name from her mind, which Feyre says that, she
Is
is
aware that he
aware
could
that
have
he could,
done, yeah.
yeah. She gives him a fake name. Rest in peace, Claire Better. Rest in peace.
Which he probably knew was fake. Which I guess in the way benefits her because he knows immediately because he has access to her mind that it's a fake name.
Yeah.
But he's like, whatever, I don't know this bitch.
Well, and there's we'll talk about that in a second too, but it's kind of a weird thing. Like, why, when he was in there, didn't he get her name? Why ask for it?
I think that's just her way of writing that he was giving her a chance to give something else, right?
Yeah,
Because there's really not even a point from having a conversation if he could just take it all from her without even asking.
that's true. That's very true.
Or ask her and then take it from her. If
Yeah,
he's wanting to make him sadistic, right? Or
right. Rhysand comes across as very playfully
evil.
mean. Yeah, he's more the type to play with his food, I guess. And, the way he taunts Lucian with his dead lover.
Yes.
Yeah, and the way that he taunts Tamlin
And threatens his mother.
yeah, and threatens his mother. He very much, they obviously have a bad opinion of the Night Court to begin with, and he played right into it, but I think it paints a very realistic picture of why Tamlin was terrified and sent her home.
I think his actions are justified in
Yes.
sending her home, not like from a stand only in the standpoint that Rhysand comes across as just an evil, sadistic
Yeah.
asshole. I mean, he kind of is.
He is, yeah. And if he's that bad, then this Amarantha who pulls
Right.
his strings must be absolutely atrocious. So, we get all of that from the scene, and it makes sense. Tamlin it's just awkward to watch.
Yeah. It's like just go sit in the cuck chair in the corner of the hotel room.
Yeah, it was really, really weird. But it is what it is. So that's what we got. He fucks her and sends her packing, and because he's afraid of Rhysand and Amarantha. Any other thoughts before I give our notes for the?
Nope.
Okay, so the notes for me to pay attention for the future are Tamlin dancing with drunk Feyre. Right, I already mentioned this briefly, so I'm not gonna hit on it too much, but we see him dancing with her while she's wasted, because that's when they're dancing. She's still wasted when they start dancing. And that's totally okay. That's a huge green flag for us for whatever reason. Feyre's happy. It's great. It's the happiest night of her life. But then we see a similar instance under the mountain, and it's just like this massive red flag. And I want to square that circle, because some of the other things, yes, I can buy that as a red flag, but some of the stuff is the exact same thing Tamlin is doing right now. And I just want to pay attention to that to compare and contrast for later. Plug your ears. Plug them. You can't hear this part. Plug them, plug them.
I'm not listening.
You are totally listening. Oh,
What?
okay. Okay, Dr. Cox, are you in your happy place?
Always.
Okay. So the Will-o'-the-Wisp's date is totally a weird parallel to Starfall. And I want to point that out. I'm not going to go into detail about Starfall. That's a huge spoiler. But the parallels between those are interesting. It's kind of like when we hear Tamlin's quote and then we hear that quote again in the next book. Some of this stuff is kind of repeated and recycled, but I want to pay attention to the Will-o'-the-Wisps and compare them to Starfall in the next book. And then we have Rhysand's quote. And I remembered we were talking about this just now, where, he saw Feyre when Tamlin was trying to hide her. So she's talking about being discovered. Rhysand says, "Where's your guest?" He lifted her goblet up and sniffed it before setting it down again. So he's getting a scent of Feyre. He's looking around for the user of the third plate that is mysteriously not in the room. And Tamlin says, "Oh, I sent them off when I sensed your arrival," which he tries to lie, like all cool, and it doesn't really work very well because Rhysand gets enraged and he's like, "You dare to glamour me?" And he just pissed and he faces Tamlin, and his perfect face was void of emotion before his brows rose, and a flicker of excitement, perhaps even disbelief, flashed across his features, but he whipped his head to Lucien. And we know that she's hiding behind Lucien, so really he's whipping his head in Feyre's direction. So I really want to highlight that. A flicker of excitement, perhaps even disbelief. He smells Feyre. He recognizes Feyre and her smell from Calanmai. But the other thing that I also want to point out is when she's talking about his voice a couple of times, when Feyre talks about him, she talks about his laugh is a lover's laugh, low and soft and intimate. And he's got his voice is like a purr. When she's talking about his voice, she's talking about it in a way that's very intimate. Like she's recognizing, and she's basically like, he's like walking talking sex, which is really weird considering how focused on Tamlin she's been the entire book. But she spends an awful lot of time comparing Rhysand and his voice and the way he talks, the way he moves, to something sensual.
She's like, I can fix him.
I can fix him. I like that. Yeah. So when he first comes in, too, I mean, she doesn't even sugarcoat it here. When he comes in and he's talking, Rhysand smiled, heartbreaking in its beauty, something feral and deadly, right? So she recognizes that he's beautiful, that he's deadly, but then she goes on to say something along the lines of, Rhysand approached Tamlin, each movement smooth as silk. Okay, I mean, that's fine. His voice dropped into a whisper, an erotic caress of sound that brought heat to my cheeks. Why is she noticing this about another man when she's obviously so smitten with Tamlin? I'm sorry, but that's like that kind of, that's like a little, not a red flag for me, but like it's definitely like a notice me. Like when I'm reading a character who's obsessed with one guy, she shouldn't be also noticing like very sexual things about another guy in a way that like physically affects her.
Yeah, which is kind of weird given the context of this scene, right?
Yes, that's like the other thing.
Up,
he's threatening
her,
people.
Mind grapes her, threatens Tamlin, talks shit about Lucian's mom and threatens her.
And somehow that's erotic.
Yeah, and she's like, that's so hot.
She describes his voice multiple times as a purr, his lover's laugh, low and soft and intimate. Like, how would you know what he sounds like when he's intimate? You've met him one time.
She gets off on the threats of violence, I guess.
I guess so. But his reaction to her, too, he's like, I remember you. He purred.
When I read that, I actually just picture him purring like a cat.
He is described often as very feline. He threatens Lucian's mom.
Yeah.
You draw blood from me, Lucien, and you'll learn how quickly Amarantha's whore can make the entire autumn court bleed, especially its darling lady. And then it's Tamlin. So just like he prostrates himself, it's Tamlin who, this man, like he rescued Lucien. He took Lucien into his court. He protected him. He killed one of his brothers. But to Rhysand, he says, the color leached from Lucian's face, but he held his ground. So Lucien was prepared to help to stand up to Rhysand. It was Tamlin who answered, put your sword down, Lucien. His lack of willingness to fight against Rhysand started way before he threw himself at his feet.
Yeah. You'd think they could just have the whole court descend on him.
You would think, yeah.
I mean, he's powerful, but he's not so powerful as they couldn't swarm him and rip him to shreds, right?
Right. You know, and then Rhysand digs into her mind too, right? I mean, yes, he's holding her mind, so maybe that's why they don't have the will to fight back that way. Like maybe part of it is preservation, but he's in there talking about Feyre's innermost sexual thoughts about Tamlin. This does not fit with this scene. It's super awkward. And it's even more awkward after you read chapter 55 in the next book. It is so awkward. Like him like sitting there reading like her inner thoughts where he's talking about, she has the most delicious thoughts about you, Tamlin. She's wondered about the feeling of your fingers on her thighs between them two. Ew. Ew.
It is kind of creepy.
Like, why are you doing that? And then he gives us kind of a nod to the fact that Feyre won't say I love you. If it's any consolation, she would have been the one for you, and you might have gotten away with it. That's another bit about the curse that we kind of skip over because there's not enough context to pull it out, but on a reread, you catch it. There's just a lot from this chapter that you really get.
Well, I don't want to pretend like we're going ahead, but I think part of his play is to try to get Tamlin to break and go feral because he wants that side of him back.
Maybe. I mean, he says to Tamlin, Amarantha will enjoy breaking her almost as much as she'll enjoy watching you as she shatters her bit by bit. I don't know. I really think that it's not about trying to get a rise out of Tamlin. I think it's about trying to terrify Tamlin into sending her home.
Well, I think part of that, but once again, because he talks about later that he feels like he's like no one else is willing to fight back, right?
Yeah.
And he knows he was in a war band at some point, evidently, with Tamlin.
Yeah, they have a history. Rhysand and Tamlin have a history.
So he knows what he's capable of, and maybe he just doesn't feel like he's capable of it anymore.
Well, Rhysand even tells Lucien that he taught Tamlin the finer aspects of swordplay. Like he was one of Tamlin's like coaches or mentors at one point. But I want to point out too, like even when Rhysand is making Tamlin beg, Feyre is still talking about him in like a sexual way. Please what? Rhysand said gently, coaxingly, like a lover. Man, she just cannot get past that. Like this whole scene is the wrong scene for her to be making these observations. Back to my notes to pay attention to for the future. That ties into it. The way Rhys talks and how Feyre frames it in her mind, even while he's threatening other people, that definitely comes into play in the future. His reaction to smelling Feyre in the room comes into play in the future. And his reaction to being Amarantha's whore, he responds with a witty, quippy comeback, but he does not like it. It's very subtle, but he does not like it. And then, like we were saying, he's doing all he can to scare Tamlin and make him want to send Feyre home. And he obviously knows Tamlin well enough. Yeah, maybe he wants him to fight back. I can buy that too. But he's doing everything he can to be like, oh, the things that Amarantha will do to her and how she's going to love watching your reaction to it. Like, he's very much threatening Feyre. Yeah. Outright threatening Feyre. And I think he knows that Tamlin will send her packing.
But once again, to me, like, I think that's him trying to stir him to action.
Any other thoughts before we wrap it up?
That's it.
Yeah, it was a pretty short set of pages. There's not a lot that really happened, although we did get a lot of gold nuggets of information about what's about to happen and really the inner workings of like the curse and the blight and everything else.
Yeah, it was good. Overall, like I said, it felt like almost like a disconnected series of scenes.
Yeah.
Linked chronologically, but ... There was still some good stuff in there.
I can agree.
Well, that wraps it up for this week. We'd love to know your thoughts on this week's chapters and content. So drop us a comment, respond to this week's poll, which I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but I'm sure it'll be intriguing and will spark lots of controversy.
Or it'll be whatever I can think up last minute.
Yes. on a scale of 1 to 10, how horny is Feyre at any given moment?
11.
Send us a DM on Instagram, wherever you share your thoughts, share this podcast. If you enjoy our show, tell your friends, share our show on social media, any of your social medias, Facebook, MySpace, LinkedIn.
You're dating yourself.
Every little bit helps. So thank you again. Hope everyone had a great holiday last week, and we hope you tune in next week.
Yes, we hope we see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the show, and share. You can connect with us on any of our social media accounts or leave us a comment. If there's anything you want to hear us talk about, reach out and let us know. We look forward to you tuning in next week.